Avoidants often chase through silence, not action. They hide their feelings behind distance and control, but internally they may struggle with longing, overthinking, and fear of losing someone. When you stop chasing and begin healing, they may realize your value, but their fear of vulnerability can keep them trapped in silence. They assumed you'd always come back, always check in, always forgive. But when you don't, their silence stops being a strategy and starts becoming suffocating. It turns into noise they can't quiet down. Every moment without you starts feeling louder. Every memory sharpens instead of fading. They start missing conversations they once brushed off, attention they once pushed away, love they once ran from without a second thought. And suddenly all the distance they carefully built starts closing back in on them. They feel boxed in by their own walls they constructed to protect themselves that have now turned into a prison they can't find the exit from. Avoidants don't chase with words, they chase with energy, with silence that somehow still carries your name inside it, with thoughts that keep circling back to you no matter how hard they try to redirect them, with dreams where they still have you, even if reality says otherwise. They'll never say any of this out loud, but you'll feel it. You'll feel it in a sudden wave of nostalgia that hits you completely out of nowhere. You'll sense it in the shift of their energy, right as you're finally starting to move on. That's them quietly reaching for you through thought, through emotion, through everything they were too afraid to actually say. Because love doesn't just pack up and leave the moment fear wins around. It lingers. It waits patiently in the background. And for them, it turns into a chase they can never fully finish. Because chasing you out loud would mean facing the truth that they still love you. That losing you wasn't the freedom they promised themselves. It was a failure they're still trying to outrun. They chase you through silence because silence is the only language they trust completely. But silence doesn't heal them the way they hope it will. It breaks them slowly instead. It traps them in a cycle of longing tangled up with pride. They think they're protecting their own heart, but really, all they're doing is slowly starving it. And while you're out there quietly rebuilding your own peace, they're still stuck replaying the exact moment you walked away, still wondering if they should have stayed, still wishing they'd said the words they swallowed instead. Because now their silence isn't protection anymore, it's pure regret. And that's how they chase, by living haunted by everything they could have said, everything they could have done, everything they'll now never get the chance to have. They don't chase you with movement, they chase you with memories. In the dark, in the quiet, inside the very silence they built for themselves, never once realizing that silence might shield you from pain, but it also keeps you miles away from real love. They pull back to feel some sense of control, yet their emotions still orbit around you constantly, because avoidants genuinely don't know how to disconnect completely, no matter how hard they try. They believe distance will protect them, that silence will hand them peace, that running away will help them forget. But it never actually does. They can physically leave the room. They can ignore every message. They can pretend they've moved on and found their freedom. But you still live inside their mind. You still exist in their quiet, unguarded moments. And that's the truth they will never admit out loud to anyone, including themselves. They don't actually stop caring. They just work overtime trying to control how visible that caring becomes. And the harder they fight that connection, the more power it seems to hold over them, because emotional avoidance was never really freedom. It's imprisonment dressed up to look like strength. They pull away because it hands them the illusion of power. They convince themselves that leaving means they've won, that they're somehow stronger than their own emotions. But deep down, they know the truth. They're not actually escaping you. They're escaping the parts of themselves that felt too exposed when you were close. They'll tell themselves you were too much, too intense, too emotionally open. But the real truth is that your presence reached places inside them they'd spent years carefully hiding away. You made them feel things they weren't prepared to face. Love, vulnerability, fear, insecurity, all of it rushing to the surface at once, and their instinct was simply to run. But here's what catches them off guard. Even after running, the emotions don't fade away. They follow. They linger. They echo through every quiet moment. Because when someone genuinely matters, distance doesn't erase the emotion attached to them. It only amplifies whatever was left unresolved. They try convincing themselves that pulling away equals detachment. But what actually unfolds is obsession in disguise. Their mind keeps circling back, wondering what you're doing, who you're spending time with, whether you've moved on, whether you still think of them at all, whether your silence is genuine or just some kind of test. They can't help it because while they hide their emotions behind cold logic, the heart doesn't answer to pride. It simply feels what it feels. And that feeling doesn't switch itself off just because there's distance involved. It intensifies. It grows louder the longer they pretend it isn't there at all. And that's exactly why avoidants chase emotionally instead of physically. They live trapped in constant internal conflict. They crave real connection, but fear it in equal measure. They want love, but can't quite handle the vulnerability that love demands of them. So instead of moving closer, they hover. They orbit you endlessly, never fully gone, never fully near, caught in their own contradiction. They'll bury themselves in distractions, work, routines, meaningless small talk with other people, but nothing ever replaces what you gave them. They might insist to themselves that they're perfectly fine, but small moments betray that story every time. They catch themselves comparing someone new to you without meaning to. They hear a song that instantly brings your energy rushing back. They walk past a place you once visited together, and suddenly everything just stops. For a brief second, the world seems to freeze, and there you are again, your presence, your voice, your laughter, replaying in their head uninvited. They shake it off. They keep walking. But the feeling lingers, because they never actually let you go. They just put distance between themselves and the pain of loving you, not the love itself, because that never really left. That's why they keep circling back emotionally, again and again, almost like gravity. No matter how far they try to drift, something about you keeps quietly pulling them back in. They pull away to dodge the possibility of rejection, but what they don't realize is that in doing so, they manufacture the exact loss they were trying to avoid in the first place. They believe leaving first will spare them the pain, but it's a lie, because the pain they experience in silence ends up louder than anything they were originally running from. They replay old moments constantly, things they said, things they didn't mean, times you looked at them with genuine love and they looked away instead, times you tried to reach them and they shut the door. And now those moments haunt them quietly. They wonder what might have happened had they stayed, had they opened up, had they trusted you instead of bolting. But they'll never say any of that out loud. They'll simply live with the quiet AKE, pretending they've moved forward while secretly reliving the very love they walked away from. Their emotions still orbit you because for them, love isn't something they can just destroy. It's something they suppress instead. And suppression was never healing, it's simply delay. Every time they attempt to move on, something quietly pulls them right back. Every time they think they've finally escaped the connection, it finds them again, in dreams, in songs, in quiet, still moments. Because you were never just someone they dated casually. You became an emotional anchor for them, a mirror that reflected their own depth back at them. And that terrifies them, because feeling that deeply reminds them exactly how fragile they are underneath all that armor. Avoidants despise feeling weak, but what they fail to understand is that love never made them weak in the first place. Fear did that, and their silence is simply fear wearing a mask of composure. So while they might appear calm, detached, even indifferent on the surface, their emotions give them away in every unguarded glance, every hesitation, every moment they almost reach out but stop themselves at the last second. They chase you emotionally by replaying old conversations over and over, analyzing your final words, wondering if you truly meant them. They think about what you might be doing right now. They picture you smiling at someone else, and it quietly eats away at them, because even though they'd never admit it, some part of them genuinely believed you'd always be there waiting in the wings. They assumed they could return whenever they felt ready, that you'd still care, that you'd still love them regardless. But watching you actually let go, sensing your genuine peace, unsettles them deeply, because peace radiating from you represents a distance they can no longer control or manipulate. And that's what genuinely terrifies them. They wanted to be the one who decided when things ended. But now they're forced to realize you were the one who ended things emotionally, long before anything official happened. And that loss lands far heavier than they ever anticipated. They start missing you, not because you're physically gone, but because for the first time, they can actually feel the empty space your presence used to fill completely. So they orbit you quietly from a distance, pretending indifference, pretending everything's fine, but their heart already knows the real story. Their emotions keep pulling toward you the same way the moon pulls the tide, relentlessly and without permission. They might resist it. They might deny it outright. But it never fully stops. You live in the quiet spaces between their thoughts, in the pause right before they drift off to sleep. In that groggy moment they wake up and reach instinctively for their phone, half expecting a message that was never actually sent. That's precisely how avoidants chase, silently, endlessly, emotionally, because even when they physically pull away, they never truly release you. They just orbit the memory of what they lost, caught between desperately wanting to move forward and being completely unable to forget. And that becomes their own quiet punishment, loving someone deeply while never gathering the courage to actually show it, pulling away while secretly hoping you'll still feel them, still think of them, still love them, even from a distance. Their pride won't allow them to reach out, so they chase you emotionally instead. Because for avoidance, love and vulnerability register as the exact same thing as danger. And danger, in their mind, must be avoided at all costs. They'll never pick up the phone and tell you they miss you. They'll never send a text admitting regret over leaving. But you live inside their mind regardless. You echo through their thoughts. You show up in their dreams uninvited. And that becomes their chase, invisible, quiet, relentless. It isn't found in what they do. It's found in what they think, in how they check their phone at 2 a.m. and set it back down without typing a single word, in how they quietly check your social media just to confirm you're still out there, in how they ask about you indirectly, playing it off as casual curiosity when inside it's genuine desperation because they're not strong enough to admit they still care, yet they can't fully let you go either. So they do the only thing they know how to do. They chase you without ever moving. They love you without ever saying it. And they punish themselves in complete silence. They replay your words in their head like a film they can't stop rewatching. They think about the last thing you said, the final look you gave them, that last moment right before everything fell apart. And they overanalyze every detail until it genuinely hurts. They try convincing themselves they don't care anymore, but their own mind betrays them every single time you cross their thoughts. They feel that familiar ache settle in their chest, that quiet pull reminding them that love doesn't simply vanish just because pride insists it should. They scroll through old messages, old photos, old memories that feel comforting and cruel all at once. They hover over the message box, desperately wanting to reach out, but fear stops them cold every single time. Because reaching out means admitting they lost control, admitting they miss you, admitting that what existed between you still matters deeply. And their ego simply can't tolerate that kind of raw truth. So they bury it all inside, convincing themselves silence equals strength when really it's their own prison. They compare everyone new they meet to you, whether they realize it or not. They talk to new people, but nothing ever quite feels right. They laugh, but it doesn't sound the same anymore. They connect, but it feels shallow and thin, because nobody else touches something in them the way you did. And they hate that. They hate that you still hold that kind of power over them, that even in your absence you remain the standard they unconsciously measure everyone else against. What they don't fully grasp is that this is their chase, not reaching out, but remembering. Not calling, but feeling everything all at once. Not directly asking for you, but missing you in ways that quietly consume their days. They might pretend they've moved on entirely, but their heart clearly hasn't caught up with that story. Because every time they hear your name mentioned, they freeze up. Every time they spot someone who resembles you, their heart skips. Every time something small triggers a memory of you, they go completely silent. And in that silence, they feel you all over again, almost as though you never actually left. They wonder what you're doing, whether you're doing okay, whether you've stopped thinking about them entirely, whether you've found someone who understands you on a deeper level. And those thoughts genuinely drive them a little mad, because the one thing an avoidant absolutely cannot tolerate is losing emotional control. And that's precisely what you took from them, without even trying to. They chase you emotionally, because they can't stomach the idea of you slipping away for good. They want to believe they still hold some invisible thread connecting you. that even without direct conversation, you're still tethered somehow. And the moment that belief starts to crack, panic sets in. That's when they start watching more closely, checking your updates, rereading old conversations, even mentally replaying old arguments, because as much as they hated the conflict at the time, it still meant you cared enough to fight for something. And now the silence between you feels heavier than any argument ever did. They chase you emotionally because it feels far safer than chasing you in real life. If they texted, they might be rejected outright. If they called, they might be ignored completely. But if they simply think about you, imagine you, hold on to the memory of you, they get to stay in what feels like control. Their emotional chase shows up in the smallest moments, in the way they smile involuntarily when your favorite song plays, in the way they pause slightly when someone brings up something that reminds them of you, in the way their entire energy shifts the second you cross their mind. It's never obvious from the outside, but it's absolutely real. They may never tell you this directly, but they miss the safety you brought into their life, the understanding, the acceptance, the way you made them feel genuinely seen without needing to explain themselves constantly. And that kind of connection isn't something easily replaced, no matter how convincingly they pretend otherwise. They might date someone new, they might stay busy and distracted, but there's always something missing, something that quietly reminds them of you. And that's the part they'll never openly admit, that even while they're with someone else entirely, they're still comparing, still remembering, still wondering what things might have looked like had they not let you go in the first place. Their pride won't allow them to reach out, so they chase you emotionally instead. They chase you through thoughts, through memories, through regret that won't quite dissolve. They chase you through an ache that refuses to leave, through a silence that feels heavier than any spoken word ever could. They chase you by trying desperately to erase you from their mind, yet every single time they attempt it, you return even stronger in their thoughts. They chase you by performing indifference, but every time they convince themselves they're finally free, something small reminds them they're not free at all. Because love doesn't simply vanish once it goes unspoken, it lingers quietly, it grows stronger in the dark, it waits patiently in the silence. And for them, that's the hardest part of all, because while you're out there genuinely healing, they remain stuck, chasing an idea of you, a memory of you, the residual energy of you. And no matter how far they run, no matter how much pride they cling to, their heart keeps circling back, again and again, to the one thing they never had the courage to actually hold on to, you. The more you heal, the harder they chase, just never out loud. Because the moment you finally stop begging for their attention, the moment you stop over-explaining yourself, the moment you stop fighting to be seen by someone who wouldn't look, something fundamentally shifts. The energy changes. The entire dynamic flips. Suddenly they're the ones watching. They're the ones wondering. They're the ones who can't stop thinking about you. Avoidants genuinely don't know how to handle real peace. They don't know what to do once the chaos they once thrived on creating simply stops existing. And when you begin healing, when you detach with grace instead of bitterness, that peace becomes their single biggest trigger because it reminds them exactly what they lost. It reminds them you're no longer dependent on them in any way. And that realization pushes them to chase you in the only way they truly know how, silently, secretly, emotionally, entirely without words, but absolutely soaked in obsession. They start feeling that loss arrive in waves. The first wave hits when they notice you no longer react at all. Your silence has stopped being punishment and has quietly become peace instead. It becomes power. It becomes calm indifference. And that drives them a little insane because for the first time, they genuinely cannot predict you anymore. They can't manipulate your emotional state through distance the way they used to. They can't win your attention back through calculated silence. You've truly detached, and somehow they can feel it, not through anything you've said, but through everything you've simply stopped doing. You used to reach out first. You used to visibly care. But now that energy has turned inward, focused entirely on yourself. And that shift forces them to confront everything they'd been avoiding all along. It makes them question every belief they held about control, because now they're the ones stuck replaying the past, wondering how someone who once cared so deeply can suddenly appear this calm, this unbothered, this genuinely free. They start chasing your energy rather than your actual presence, because your healing has become magnetic to them. Your peace has become intoxicating in a way they can't quite explain. They thought they had you completely figured out, but now you've become a mystery to them all over again. And mysteries are irresistible to avoidants. They're pulled toward whatever they can't control, whatever feels just out of reach. So even without calling or texting, their mind keeps drifting back to you, wondering how you're really doing. Who's giving you that new sense of peace, whether someone else now gets to experience the warmth they once took completely for granted. They start missing the energy that once flowed toward them so freely, and that missing quietly transforms into silent chasing. They might act completely unaffected on the surface. They might post smiling pictures, laugh with friends, even start seeing someone new entirely, but none of it feels quite the same to them. Everything feels muted compared to whatever spark existed with you. They try to recreate that feeling elsewhere, but it never quite works because they were never actually addicted to you specifically. They were addicted to the version of themselves your love brought out into the light. And now that you're gone, they simply can't locate that version of themselves again, no matter where they search. They keep looking for it in other people, in distractions, in noise, but nothing ever fills that particular void. And the more you continue growing, the larger that void becomes for them, because they slowly start realizing their avoidance was never actually strength. It was fear the entire time. And their silence was never peace either. It was loss, plain and simple. While you're out there healing, they're quietly sinking, pretending everything's fine while secretly missing the one connection that made them feel genuinely alive. They chase you through memories, through nostalgia, through every small reminder of what used to exist between you. They replay your laughter in their mind on loop. They remember the exact way you looked at them, the rare moments they let their guard down. They recall the softness in your voice whenever you spoke honest truth into their chaos. And every single time they revisit those memories, they feel the ache all over again. They feel the absence settle in. They feel the full consequences of having pushed away someone who genuinely only wanted to love them. They won't reach out because their pride still stands guard over that decision, but they chase emotionally regardless. They quietly monitor your energy. They check whether you're still emotionally tethered to them in some way. And the moment they sense you're no longer tied to them at all, panic quietly sets in, because avoidants crave control far more than they crave genuine connection. And once that control disappears entirely, they start crumbling quietly behind a carefully maintained facade of indifference, behind a smile that never quite reaches their eyes. They begin comparing life before you and life after you. Before, things felt chaotic, but they felt truly seen, lost, but genuinely loved. After, things feel empty, free but strangely hollow, calm but deeply lonely. And that realization burns slowly over time. It eats at them in unexpected moments, like lying alone at night scrolling through old photos they should have deleted long ago, rereading messages they swore they'd erased, remembering small things you once said that didn't register back then but suddenly mean everything to them now. And it hurts because they realize you didn't just suddenly stop loving them one day. You simply got tired. Tired of fighting for someone who wouldn't fight equally hard for you. Tired of proving your worth to someone too afraid to actually see it clearly. And that understanding breaks them quietly because they finally see the truth. The person they assumed would always stick around has genuinely walked away for good. They chase you, not because they're actually ready to come back, but because they simply can't handle the idea of being replaced. They can't tolerate the thought of someone else receiving the exact love they once rejected outright. They'll never say it aloud, but jealousy becomes their quiet, constant companion. They wonder if someone knows your favorite coffee order by heart, whether someone else gets to hear your voice first thing in the morning, whether someone else makes you laugh the way they once did. And that thought drives them a little mad, because even though they were the ones who left, they still can't stand the possibility of being forgotten entirely. They'll pretend indifference on the surface, but underneath, they're watching, waiting, quietly hoping for some small sign that you still think of them, because that's the only way they feel any sense of safety, knowing they still exist somewhere in your heart, even if they no longer deserve that space at all. The more you heal, the harder they chase, because healing was never about revenge. It's transformation. It's the quiet internal shift that turns old pain into genuine power. And when you rise above what they once broke, it confronts them directly with everything they lost. They assumed they could outrun their own feelings, but your visible strength forces them to finally feel everything they'd been suppressing for so long. Your peace becomes a mirror, reflecting their avoidance, their fear, their emptiness right back at them. And though they'll never admit it to you directly, they feel it every single day, in every quiet, unguarded thought, in every restless night, in every flash of memory reminding them of the love they once pushed away. They chase, not to get you back necessarily, but to feel whole again the way they did when you were around. Because you were the one person who made their walls come down, who genuinely saw the real them underneath everything, and now that you're gone, their chase has become endless, not really for you specifically, but for the version of themselves that only ever existed when they were loved the way you loved them.